did the presentation to this committee. And you also did it, the talk was 2-3 months ago. So I think the better plan is to ask questions, unless anybody wants to hear. And Tony, Rita, feel free to jump in too if you want. Ready?
How much property is going to be confiscated under this plan?
No property is going to be confiscated under this plan.
Thank you.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So the open space plan is a set of goals that are outlined using conservation targets. It is based on objective natural resource inventory data that was collected over many years. That natural resource inventory data, which includes things like what soils are here, what trees are here, what bedrock is here, what farm land is here, was overlaid. So if a parcel has farmland and it has a forest next to it and it's close to a river and all these different things, these ecological values were overlaid together to create a composite map. And that composite map outlines the conservation areas of the greatest concern within the city. And that is done by the regions of the city, the areas of the city. It is not done on the parcel level. So it doesn't get to the point of saying, okay, you know, Rabbi Nucci's property is prime because it's by the water and it's undeveloped and has trees and this and this and this. It is a general conservation goals for different areas of the city, large swaths of area that have many natural resource features in the same location that are overlapping. In general, what we saw was that got narrowed down to effectively about 3 different locations on the perimeter of the city, as the center of the city, as it is in most urban cores, is the most developed and should be where the development is concentrated, and that the more minimal development currently is on the periphery of the city bounds. What was done with this open space plan is taking those locations and saying, okay, in those general areas and in this plan itself, those areas were designated with a name that doesn't exist anywhere else. So the Hudson Uplands that title was created for the area that is proposed for City of Hudson and beyond, that whole area over there on the Hudson Riverfront, the Rondout Uplands, the Esopus Valley, different areas. And within those zones, priorities were identified to say, our goal is, our vision is to preserve X acres of access, X acres of farmland, X acres of trails. It's not identified to the parcel level. So it doesn't say on the Hudson Riverfront, like I'm going to keep using Rob as an example because he owns a lot of our waterfront. It doesn't say anywhere in here or bind us to anything that says 300 acres of Rabbi Nucci's property is going to be turned into forest. It doesn't say anywhere any specific property. No specific property is mentioned in any of these because it's not to that level. And what it is it identifies a swath of area with the same natural resource components together that further feasibility, further financial understanding, further planning, further design would go to those locations and say, okay, in this entire multi-acre area of the Rondout Uplands, we have a goal of protecting 60 acres. Now this is far beyond 60 acres. So we're not saying, okay, this property, this property, this property. We're saying generally in this area, which has high ecological value remaining, 60 of those acres should be preserved. And so this is a vision for the city. The vision is outlined here simply in this vision map. And in some of the descriptions, it goes into the ecological values of the different areas. I know that one of the areas of concern is the Esopus Valley. And the Esopus Valley is identified in this open space plan. It is designated as the area that is along the buffer and the shoreline and the low-lying areas of the Esopus, which is along our northern quadrant of the city. This includes many different parcels, including parcels that are developed and parcels that are not. It includes areas of different property owners, the Newcomb Property, Point of Praise Property, many others, some that are proposed development, some that are not proposed yet, some that are already developed. And this particular area of concern, we want to identify 50 additional acres of farmland. It doesn't say where, and it doesn't say, nor are there anything binding within this open space plan as to what that would look like.
Tony had a question.
How much acres do you know off the top of your head where the area that we are talking about?
I do not.
All right, is it more than?
It's more than 50.
That would be good to know, because if we're looking at this and it's, they're saying 50 acres, but it's 60 acres versus 200 acres, that makes a big difference.
Okay, that's a great point. So, for instance, understanding, so here we identify 5,000 additional linear feet of public access. Well, how many feet are there currently? So is that 100%? Is that 5%? I understand that concern, and in our, we're not going to, we can certainly understand that and have that as part of there. I do not know offhand how many acres are identified in this Esopus Valley area. I do not know, but I know it's more than 50.
One other question, I hate to be done with.
No, you're right.
Is it other people's properties that, that's similar, that's what's in question in this plan right here? I know you're talking about Iannucci's plan. Some of his properties in this comprehensive plan right now, or this open space plan, I should say?
Nobody's property is in this open space plan. Not one person, parcel, property owner, development, or proposed existing is listed in this open space plan.
It's a concept.
It is conceptual, it is target goals. Nowhere in here does it mention a single developer's name or property, because it's not to the parcel level. It doesn't say on parcel XXXXX we're going to do this. It doesn't, it's not, these regions aren't even bounded by parcel boundaries. It's literally ecological features, not at all based on who owns what. I'm using the example of Iannucci because I work with him all the time, and I know that I can throw him under the bus if I need to, and he'll be okay with it, and he owns most of our waterfront. So this...
And the waterfront's in there.
And the waterfront is in here,
Okay.
both on the Rondout Uplands portion and the Hudson Uplands portion.
So Julie, in the property that that's in question, and you, as a concept, you want to include that in the open space plan, right?
We're not including any property in the open space plan. So there's not now, nor will there be, changes to this open space plan unless we do another version. And nowhere in it does it say anything about any specific property.
Okay.
So any deduction from people reading this is a deduction on their own to say, self-identify, my property is within the area of the Rondout Uplands. And some might say, hey, I own the Lawton Park property, and I'm in this zone right here, the Rondout Uplands, and I would love that to be conserved. Some others might say, I have a proposed development in the Esopus Valley, and I don't want that to be preserved. And that is ultimately up to the planning board, using this as a guidance document for conservation targets and goals. So there are no property, I can't say it enough times, there are no property owners identified in this, there are no specific parcels identified in this at all.
So, and Mr. Larry's here, on behalf of the property that we've been questioned. Were they notified that about this thing? I'm not, about this open space plan. It seems like from what I gathered and from last caucus and the conversations, phone conversations, communication I had, that they were not aware that their property, that land might be, the open space land might include where they are starting to develop that. And so I think that's where the concern, I guess, was, I was that we have this property, we're trying to develop it, and it's inside this open space plan. What's gonna happen?
Sure.
And I'm not sure if that was communicated, educated to the general public as good as.
Sure.
Not just people.
So every property in the city of Kingston is in this open space plan. Every property is. Whether you live here or here or here, your property is identified either in a conservation area or not in the open space plan. So we didn't go through and say it's valuable for us to let this developer know that they're in this designation and this developer know that they're in this designation. What we did do was during the natural resources inventory data gathering portion of the project, which was technically from 2017 through 2018, and prior to the consultant being brought on, it was prior to 2017, we've been gathering this information for more than 5 years. We had multiple public meetings, we had open public comment for a period of time. All of those maps are publicly available on the city's website. When we transitioned into the open space plan portion of the project, which was in the beginning of 2018, the end of 2017, we held multiple public meetings. All of those public meetings results are reflected in the back of the open space plan. So you'll, if you peruse through the appendices of the open space plan, you'll understand where we got the justification for these areas, because people came out and said, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do this, this is important to us. And nowhere in that area did it also get into the parcel level. It didn't get into the development level. None of this at any point has gotten to the, we want to do this on this particular property, because that is the job of the planning board.
All right. So if you-
Jeffrey
I'm
had a
sorry,
question.
Jeff.
Could you just clarify, one of the concerns was if somebody's property falls within one of these valuable resource areas, would that hinder their chances of getting a development permit?
It's still going to be up to the planning board. And this doesn't change anything in the way that the planning board has to make their decisions. So this is a resource for the planning board and developers to look at, to use, to understand what currently exists based on objective data that exists, natural resource objective data, to understand where the collective value is in natural resources. The planning board should be doing that already, and developers, in my opinion, should be doing that already. But this puts this into a concise document that you can say, this is now available, it is publicly available, and you know that this is here. In terms of the process that we're requesting that you proceed through, which is adoption as an element of the comprehensive plan, the difference between this being adopted as an open space plan as a city document, which you could do and say, I'm not doing it in the comp plan, we've talked about this before, then it would be a resource that folks could look at, exactly as I outlined just now. If you adopt it as an element of the comprehensive plan, then it would be followed in the same way that the visions and elements of the comprehensive plan are followed, in which case it would need to be reviewed. And again, even as being reviewed, it still does not get to the parcel level. It still is the exact same information that I'm telling you, whether you read it through the comp plan or not. It's just that this outlines goals that say, our goal is to preserve X in this area and this in this area.
When it gets into the comprehensive plan, does that legally bind the planning board to anything different than they're doing now?
They have to make their decisions consistent with the plan. The same as they have to make their decisions consistent with the comprehensive plan. So in the comprehensive plan, it has direct strategies and objectives, objective 1.0, objective 9. Whatever, and what should be happening, and I don't know if it's happening or not, but there should be direct the planning board should be making their decisions, making sure that they are in compliance with the comp plan. Now, the comprehensive plan has very specific objectives in it. It says things like, well, some are very specific and some are more broad. So it says certain things about form-based code, certain things about all these different ways that we develop the city. This is not anywhere to that type of level of complexity or of detail. Any area that's identified in here, again, would still need to go that further step of design and parcel level design if we choose to move forward in that direction. This is setting goals. So in terms of your question of compliance, they would need to comply with the fact that we said, okay, we want to preserve in this area 60 acres. So that is a very broad, very, very broad goal that can easily be achieved.
Well, it would help if we knew how many acres that was.
Yes.
You know. But Tony had a question, then Bill.
Again, I think you explained it, I just wanted, what was this resolution? So what does this resolution say? And again, and that's,
Sure.
in layman's terms, if you can.
Yep. So when I presented this to the council, I presented a few options. I'm, of course, advocating for one option over another, but the options that you have, of course, you have a no action option, which is great. Thanks, Julie, for your time. Have a nice day. You have the option of adopting the open space plan as a plan of the city, the same way you adopt the climate action plan or other plans, not the way you adopted the comp plan, but other plans to say, okay, this is our official open space plan, and we have an official open space plan on the books, which is a reference that folks can look at if they choose to or not. And the third option is to adopt it as an element of the comprehensive plan. Now, in order to do that, it has to go through the State Environmental Quality Review Act process, SEQR, and in order to do that, it needs to be determined what type of action it is. And in the resolution that was passed out of committee, laws and rules, it was determined it was a type 2 action, and that the next step as well is for the council or someone to be declared as lead agency, which would proceed the process through the review, proceed the adoption through the review process. The council did not, through this resolution, state that they would be lead agency, because that's not how the process works. You have to put this out to interested and involved agencies and say, we are interested in being the lead agency, but the other interested and involved agencies, including the Ulster County Planning Board, the town of Ulster, and others that are surrounding, they could have the opportunity to say, no, we want to be the lead agency. And then we would go through that dialogue and proceed from there. What the resolution that you adopted, that you advanced, stated was that this is a type 2 action, and that we're interested in starting the process, and that we will circulate to interested and involved parties that we are interested in being lead agency. So that is not adopting it into the comprehensive plan. It is not making any decisions to adopt it. It is saying, we would like to start the environmental review process, which also starts the public process.
Bill had a question first.
Yeah, Julie, the advantage to approving not just the document, but linking it with the comprehensive plan is that when the comprehensive plan gets reviewed, this will also get reviewed along with it. So it would be updated and changed with the times, as opposed to just sitting on a shelf and then something that you refer to 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later. So, right, so the advantage of being in the comprehensive plan is that there will still be eyes looking at it, and it can be easily changed or at least easily or changed or modified. Is that correct? Am I understanding that right?
We have many plans in the city that are adopted and sit on a shelf, and we have many plans in the city that are adopted and do not sit on a shelf. Just because you adopt it outside of the comp plan doesn't mean that it will be disregarded. It should still be respected and reviewed. If you choose to advance this as part of the comprehensive plan, it should, first of all, it demonstrates that the city is committed to open space review on the level of planning, the way that the comprehensive plan objectives are outlined, and it also subjects the entire process to a complete environmental review process, which would not be the case with simple adoption.
Rita had a question.
Okay, so from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that this property that is of concern has already been through secret, already been to the planning board. So should this go, should we adopt this and it moves forward, is that going to have to begin with this process or with this property? How is that all going to work?
So the property that is in question was before the planning board several years ago. There was review at that time, including some environmental review and comments. Then it stalled for a number of reasons outside of the city's purview, and then it was brought up a couple of years ago, more recently, to our planning board again, and then it stalled again for reasons outside of the city's purview. There's not been planning board approval of the property at the time. There are multiple stakeholders involved in that property. The Conservation Advisory Council, of which I chair, and of which sanctioned and moved through this open space plan, has commented both in the first round of proposals for the property and the second round on the Conservation Advisory Council's review of the environmental impacts of the property. There would be no reason at this time that I can foresee that any specific development would be halted based on this document. There's no grounds for that in this document. It's not on the parcel level. So there's nothing in this document that says you cannot advance this property because of the open space plan.
But also, and I'll let Dan jump in a little bit to explain it more, but the seeker process that we're requesting for the open space plan is the whole project. It's not, we wouldn't be able to take out a piece of it just because it went through, because that project went through the seeker process, and then now we're looking at putting this whole thing through the seeker process. But I don't know if Dan could explain it a little bit better.
Yeah, just to clarify in terms of Rita's question, the project was before the planning board. The planning board conducted a secret review. At the time of the secret review, the CAC voiced many of the same objections and articulated many of the issues that are currently fleshed out more in the plan. The planning board issued a negative declaration at that time, okay, but did not move forward to site plan approval because of other impediments that were unrelated to the issues raised by the CAC that are more connected to access and issues with the county. So the negative deck was issued, I believe it was 6 years ago or 7 years ago, and then the project just stopped. Okay, so in response to Tony's question about notice of these issues, the vast majority of these issues were hashed out in front of the planning board back when, and everyone was on notice of the CAC's concerns. Okay, with regard to that prior determination, there are vehicles under SECRA where that would have to be revisited if they come back for site plan again, based upon a change of circumstances or a change in the topography, or in this case, potentially the adoption of a new element of the comprehensive plan. Okay, but ultimately that's an issue for the planning board, as Julie said, when they reinitiate site plan review. Okay, ultimately all that's going to have to be reconciled, but it has to be reconciled by the planning board, not by this body. That make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, Mrs. O'Leary, did you want to say anything? No. So I just want to be confident in that when Elder Childs comes to me and asks me about this whole process, I know what I'm telling him and giving him the correct information. And are we confident in telling him that by us adopting this plan, it is not going to in any way stop any kind of development that they might want to do on this property pending planning board approval?
Well, that will be for what we're having in front of us right now, starting the secret process. This will give people the chance. It opens it up to the public. It gives us.
I understand that, but I think I'm piggybacking off of what you said earlier. This in no way halts any development. So I'm just kind of repeating that just so I can hear it again, so I know what to say to that.
This document does in no way say a specific development should not be developed in a certain area because of this document. It says that every review by the planning board, it doesn't say this would be inherent to adoption within the comp plan, that the planning board, as an elected body, as an appointed body of the city, would need to refer to the open space plan. In this open space plan, it does explicitly say, in the Esopus Valley, in the Esopus Creek corridor, these are our goals. And the goals do not say anything like, don't put this development here. It says, we would like to recognize the existing farmland, the floodplain, and the wetlands. We would like to improve shoreline management and removal of debris. We would like to create appropriate sites for kayak and canoe launches. We would like to create walking paths along the water. Do you need a hand, Bevo? You got this? Okay.
Right.
And so there's conservation targets within here over the next 10 years for protecting 50 additional acres.
Right. So then does any of those things, should they be identified, would that preclude any development on the property?
It's not specific to that property because all of these things could happen on this property if the planning board chooses to advance the Esopus Meadows project.
The planning board needs to make findings on any application that's put in front of it. So there are no general rules that preclude them from approving or disapproving a project. Will they have to consider this? Absolutely, but they have to consider it anyway.
Okay.
Because in the process of their secret review, they're still going to be reaching out to CAC and asking CAC for their concerns. Okay, and by initiating the secret review, all you're really doing is creating a forum where the concerns that you are raising, as well as the concerns that anybody else raises, can be vetted and discussed by this body. So, I mean, that's the first step, is you create the forum and you let people bring their concerns forward. If you don't start the secret process, none of this ever happens.
So it's there's 3 steps if we're going backwards, right? We can adopt this and put it as part of our comprehensive plan.
But if we do that, we have to start the secret process.
Correct. The second choice, or the other choice, is do nothing.
Yep.
What was the third choice, Julie, again?
Adopt it as a city plan.
Right. Which doesn't require a secret review and doesn't create the forum to address all of the issues that you're speaking about, and also doesn't give it the same force and effect if and when you adopt it.
But that middle and that last option wouldn't hinder anybody going there. Would they still have to go past the planning board? So the planning board wouldn't then have this thing to say, okay, we gotta see how we have to go by this thing that's in the comprehensive plan. The planning board wouldn't have to do that then. If they adopt that one where it's just part of the city, this is part of the city.
Any review that the planning board does on the secret, they're still going to have to consider the concerns raised by the CAC, which are going to be the same concerns that are set forth in this report. Okay, by initiating the secret review, again, you're creating a forum where all of these issues can be expressed and vetted and, addressed by this body. That's all that's all that's being asked, this evening.
But Julie, just for our own, I guess, sanity, is there a way to find out, like, 50 additional acres of farmland, of how much that actually is? I know you don't have that information now, but is that?
Yes. I can find out
Doable?
anything you'd like.
But that's also a question that necessarily has to be answered in the secret review.
It does or doesn't?
Does.
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 Yeah.
So, I mean, you can vote to circulate your request for lead agency, okay? And then once you are declared the lead agency and you're starting the review, that information can be, provided because it's, it's critical information.
Yeah. Just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
If it doesn't go into the comprehensive plan, then nothing happens with this property. Anybody who's developing doesn't have to go any further, doesn't have to go. The planning board would be bound by, all right, we have to look at this, whoever's coming to develop, we have to look at this because it says now 50 acres, et cetera, has to be cordoned off in this particular area.
Correct.
They wouldn't have to look at that anymore.
They don't.
They wouldn't have to check that off. Okay, well, on our review, we got, 50 acres has to be. They wouldn't have to do that now. This is not part of the comprehensive plan.
Well, except they're still going to circulate the request to the CAC, and the CAC is going to say the same thing anyway.
Well,
They're
they're
just going to
still,
say it's site-specific.
they still have to go through secret review, and the secret review still mandates environmental reviews.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether we have an open space plan or not, and the first 2 times that this was brought before the planning board, it went under environmental review at that time. We didn't have an open space plan at the time. So the same environmental reviews would happen under the seeker process for that particular project. Not every project needs to undergo seeker, and a proposal could come by where somebody wants to redevelop a property in the middle of Kingston, and the planning board should still review this information, and as should the developer, to understand what might be a better place or a good place or a prime place to develop.
And we're not privy to why you said before that this particular area that we're talking about, this particular project has stalled in regard to this environmental review.
No, it hasn't
It's
sold.
all
with
because
regard
of the
to
environmental review.
It got a neg deck 7 years ago.
It's
But that was at
sold
the
with
county
regard to
level.
site plan review
Site
based
plan.
on, and I forget the, lady's name sitting next to me.
Auxiliary.
It was actually there for the whole thing, but there were issues in terms of access that had to be negotiated through the county.
Right, which I
project-
thought was,
That we have nothing to do with.
And the
It's
project
that
did not
The site plan
stall.
could not be, what's that?
I was just gonna say, go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and it stopped there because, those issues were never resolved.
So
The
the
site plan, seeker was never sold. Seeker
Okay.
was completed. Site plan was contingent on them securing access and resolving certain issues with the county, and those issues were never resolved.
So
That
those
doesn't
are
mean
the-
they're not resolvable.
Yeah, if those issues were to be resolvable,
They could come back with their site plan.
and then now if it's part of the comprehensive plan, the planning board can say, well, even though you got your site approval, your access.
Well,
or
not
whatever.
necessarily, because the secret, and that's a legal issue that would be determined at the time.
Okay.
And, an argument would be made one way or another whether there was a basis to reopen the secret determination that was made 6 years ago.
yes.
You're on the agenda, so yes.
I am on the
Yeah,
agenda.
yeah.
Forgive me. Is now a good time?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Peg O'Leary. I'm with Hudson Valley Housing. And as stated, we've been working on Kingston Meadows for a number of years, and it got down to simply the crossing over the U&D that's owned by the county. Some of my concerns that are mentioned this evening is of that acreage proposed in the Esopus area, we have 25 acres. And it would take a little bit of math to figure it out, but I believe the balance of the acreage may be developed so that we are, in essence, the impacted property. But key to this is there's statements in the open space plan that I understand is final, that's not accurate. And in order to do a seeker review or coordinated review, the material that you're asking the involved parties and agencies or interested parties and agencies to consider must be accurate. And this is not accurate relative to the rail trail connection, relative to other issues. But getting back to the comprehensive plan, once this, if open space goes into the comprehensive plan, which I have no idea of any other municipality in all of New York State that has it in the consolidated plan, you are then, as Mrs. Nobles mentioned, giving it teeth. It's almost like adding to the zoning or planning. It gives us another hurdle beyond the seeker that we have to review. And comprehensive plans encompass everything, including the development of affordable housing. The inclusion of an open space plan in a comprehensive plan is the opposite of what you work very hard to do with affordable housing. I am concerned because the CAC did produce this open space plan, and yes, we were aware of the public hearings, we were aware of everything that was going on, but it was only recently that we were advised that it was going to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan. That's a whole different ball of wax because now it becomes regulatory. And regulatory adds to the challenge. And with a vacant parcel of land, yes, we not only have one seeker from the City of Kingston Planning Board, we also have a zoning board seeker neg deck. So we have met all the criteria of the city. It's a vacant parcel, and when we go back to the planning board, they will decide if there is any thresholds. But once you put this into a comprehensive plan, you are crippling. And the fact that this area that's highlighted
encompasses basically our land. It may not be by name, but by map, it is our land because we are basically the only vacant land there. And relative to this having access for a rail trail, the Thruway Authority has decided to close that tunnel. There's not going to be a way to connect to the Hurley Rail Trail. And as recently as February of this year, the Thruway has made their position clear. They are not going to maintain that tunnel. When that tunnel was last reviewed, it was deteriorating, it's continued to deteriorate, and it's not going to be there. So in this plan, it states that our property, which is the former O&W rail bed, could be a connecting trail. Basically, it's only our property because it's on record with the New York State Thruway Authority that they are closing. And I've taken the liberty of bringing copies of those confirmation from the Thruway that they're closing it. I've also brought confirmation of course, in the past, CAC has made comments at just about every public hearing, and the planning board did acknowledge them and did incorporate into the adopted neg deck the comments of the CAC. So we have addressed everything, we've met the criteria, and I'm here today because I'm gravely concerned about the fact that based on maps, whether or not our name is mentioned, our property will in essence be taken. It may still be in our name, but there will be a document on file that could preclude our development.
Could you tell me who we are? You mentioned we about 10 times.
Hudson Valley Housing Development Fund Company.
Is this a private company?
It's a private, not-for-profit,
It's non-for-profit.
incorporated on St. Patrick's Day, 1987. It's a subsidiary of Community Services Programs who's celebrating 44 years in affordable housing development. We have housing in Ulster, Orange, and Dutchess County. We have 300 apartments that we've built and we've managed. We've
Yeah, I got
offered
it. I
in the
just
past
wanted
and
to
offer
look
again references from the City of Beacon City Manager and also Building Department. And our housing, in this case for Kingston Meadows, would be for senior housing. The city has not had senior housing for individuals over the age of 62 built within the city limits for more than 16 years. 16 years. All the for-profit developers are building out of the city. So anyone, as was our situation in the city of Beacon, we have built over 100 senior citizen apartments in the city of Beacon because the residents there wanted to stay there. But in order to stay there, there was no affordable housing, there was no handicap accessible housing, there was no housing that met their needs. So we're a private not-for-profit. I've been with Community Services and Hudson Valley for 34 years. We have a volunteer board of directors. A member of our board and officer is Joan Eck, who you've met. Dave Murdy, retired from Central Hudson, Director of Gas Operations. And Greg Supple, who is an attorney, a bond counsel. Locally, John Lawrence, who worked on the Batman Castle redevelopment. Another banker, Bill Melcher, and also an architect, Paul Phelan.
And you're saying that this property here is owned by the Hudson Valley Development Company?
Yes.
Would you mind outlining on here what the property is?
Actually, I gave an email previously. If I may give you this. It's also the site that's proposed for a kayak launch. And I'd like to remind or mention that a number of years ago, we approached the city and offered, in lieu of a reduced recreation fee, to donate 9 acres. And the city responded by saying that there was no development or financial interest in the property, and that they had more than enough parks and recreation, and they needed the resources.
Is this the same email? Can I just make a reference? Would you say that this blue that I outlined is the same as what you outlined here?
If it abuts the Thruway?
Just, if you see how I colored that blue in the same as the yellow? Is that, I'm just asking if
I'm
that's.
sorry, I can't see the yellow.
Okay, the yellow, and then I just colored in the blue here.
If it abuts the thruway, yes.
Okay, so just as a reference, then, if you're saying this is 25 acres, all of this
Vote?
is the area identified to identify 50 acres. So this is less than a quarter of the total
Oh,
property.
but the hump is developed land with the point of praise that you mentioned?
Right, the left half has solar on it, I understand that, and the right half is not developed.
And it's the church.
Correct.
And you have the church.
Yep,
Trailways?
and then there's this entire area over here, which is,
Trailways is also
which in and
there.
of itself is at least 50 acres.
But is that
The
developed,
road
or
to
is
access
that,
is the
nope.
same road, trailways.
This is open previous
No,
farmland that was,
we're going to
that is the
cross
Newcomb property.
Our property to get
This
out.
is wetland
Property that
area
is
along the
we have
shoreline of the
So
Soaplands.
5 Perry Avenue, we own. Now, as far as the
Is that
second
behind Stony Road?
access. Pardon?
Is that behind Stony Road?
can we just make sure that everybody hears the conversation so that we can all hear the answers?
So Julie was just stating that that's more, that partial, that part there, one area is more than 50 acres, you're saying, right?
No,
I'm
that's what-
saying if we're looking at the area that is in question, which is this blue outline, and Peg is saying that this portion of it, which she concurs, I copied from what she outlined, is 25 acres, then that deduces that the entirety of it, the remaining entirety, is well more than 50 acres in and of itself.
And actually, on
Is
this
there
map,
any way
it's even
that-
smaller.
That we could change
Which is part.
the colors of this map to to exclude this portion so people feel a little bit better, and then when people are looking at this and they comp plan, if it is adopted, that it's not going after that developed land. I mean, 'cause to look at that, green area at the Soapus Valley, if part of it is already developed or going to be developed, can that be indicated in here?
There are areas in every one of these regions that are already developed.
Yeah, and
So
so,
there isn't
not
any
about-
precedence in this plan for choosing one development and excluding it.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to know. Yep.
well, and the value of us going through the secret process is that these are precisely the issues that people can bring up. These are precisely the things that we can, really talk about in that process on the record.
And bring in more people to have more public comment. And,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I mean, so again, I was for moving forward for just, seeking lead agency, then we could really delve into this, and then after that, I mean, we still don't have to, it doesn't mean if we neg deck this, that doesn't mean we're adapting this into a comprehensive plan. It could go through seeker, it could get a neg deck, and then the council could say, but we're not doing this. That is another option.
And if there are facts that you believe are inaccurate in the context of the secret review, you can certainly bring those out and they can be corrected if they should be corrected.
Agreed.
It's just a better vehicle for former analysis throughout these and get our questions answered.
And then also the points that are on here, this is not like, so you're suggesting maintaining 50 acres of open space in that one area in the Soapus Valley. That's a goal, right? That's
Correct.
not like a hard and fast rule. The planning board can also grant waivers, right?
Correct.
So they have complete freedom to make something like this possible.
Correct.
Yeah, so this is not a taking of land. It's not a limitation. It's an advisory sort of thing. And, like if we go through the seeker process, we can also discuss any specific issues like this.
Correct.
Julie, she mentioned that there was no other city that she knows of that has this in their comprehensive plan. Do you know of any other cities that have a comprehensive plan with this? Are we ahead of the curve?
We are not ahead of the curve, and we are not the first. I can provide a list of locations in the next day that have them. I'm not able to say any offhand,
Okay,
but there certainly are, and I can provide them in New York State and other states.
thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so we referred this back to committee, the resolution.
So I just want one question for.
Sure.
Just want to be clear. So by accepting this as a lead agency, if this passes through,
This would be saying we want to be lead agency, we would.
we're sending this communication out to all the adjoining towns and cities.
The involved and interested agencies.
That we want to be the lead agency, but they can come in and say they want to be the lead agency.
Yes.
And if that's passed, and let's say, we're lead agency, because nobody else wants to do it. Then, what is the next step? This resolution passed, it goes through, Kingston down the lead agency on this open.
Then the seeker process starts.
Which is going through an extensive environmental review process where we are asked we will respond to questions regarding how stormwater is going to be managed using this, how land use is changing, how pollution is affected. The standard state environmental quality review form through that process, and also public comment, seeking public comment.
Who's going to prepare the form for the seeker? Is that the CAC or is that the consultant who's?
It is not the consultant unless we choose to pay them to do so, and we haven't chosen to do that. It would be the city, in conjunction with the Common Council, which will be declaring itself lead agency.
So we'd be filling out, we'd be doing the form plus then lead agency.
Yes.
And then we have how many public hearings after that?
Generally, it's one public hearing that you can determine how long it continues based on what is presented. What we usually do with the planning board is we have one public hearing on the record, and at the end of the evening, we leave the hearing open strictly for the submission of written comments. We try to encourage the public rather than to, come and, repeat comments, to put them in writing. We say, public hearing's open until the close of business the Friday before the next council meeting. Okay, you get written comments, you get, all that gets circulated to the council before the council will start deliberating with regard to the positive or negative there.
So did that answer your
And that's
question?
one other question, and going back to this, and you probably answered this, Julie. In this open space plan, is this only developed land, or it's not just developed land, it's farmland or swampland, whatever that is on the thing that says we want 50 acres, or is it this saying we want 50 acres? Part of this open space plan is 50 acres of developed land. Is that, am I saying that correctly?
It does not specify whether it is currently developed, proposed development, not developed. It doesn't specify what type of land in terms of, is it a wetland, is it scrub, is it farm, is
You're
it?
just saying in there, in that particular area that we're talking about, it says 50 acres of land.
Correct.
And you will be able to get back to us, I know you didn't have that thing, how many acres is in that area?
Yes.
Okay.
So just to clarify, so if there's a development that has a big garden open property, that's considered, even though it's developed, that open garden is considered open space, correct?
We don't have a definition to that level of what open space is.
Okay.
It's a vision of understanding the composite collaboration of where the natural resources are. So if you have your house here, this is your house and this is your yard, we're not saying that that's open space versus Hasbro Park is open space versus something else. We don't have that sort of definition in this plan. This is an atypical community to be doing an open space plan. I will admit that. We are not Gardner, we are not Shongum, we're not a community that has miles and miles of large contiguous tracts of land. We are an urban or semi-urban area, and we are looking to understand how to provide goals for making development choices moving forward that best considers our natural resources.
So should we determine that this space or this land, composites come back and it determines that yes, this is natural resources, and should they be on that land, that point of praise is talking about, then that will be declared as open space and then into this plan right here. Is that correct?
No. no other determination is going to be made besides what has already happened in this open space plan, which is a prioritization of the areas that are outlined and what you see here. Literally this entire space, some 50 acres of this entire space, of which we've now determined that the parcel in question is less than 1/4 of the percentage of that 50 acres. Some 50 acres of this, which could be contiguous 50 acres or not, there's a goal that we think it's a good idea to preserve that. That could mean we do nothing. It could mean that this area is preserved. It could mean that this and this and this and this and this and a little here and here are preserved. It could mean none of it. It could mean 5 acres of it. And this is over the course of the next 10 years. It's a goal.
And that would be part of the planning board's decision.
That would be part of the planning
Which
board's
parts?
decision.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
So we don't need a committee report. We just
Well,
vote
that's
to.
sent back, so you have a committee report, so you
Right,
just
well,
send
that's
it
what
back
I
to
mean.
council.
Committee report. So I'll read the resolution and then
Yeah, you should
we vote on it to
yeah,
move it
because it was sent back, so you.
back,
vote
or-
to send
Be a
it back
different
to
day.
council.
So, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, to undertake a coordinated review of the City of Kingston, New York open space plan. Is there a motion to move forward for this?
Yes, I will make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so this will then now go back to the Common Council. You got that? Aye, and then take it from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
I can get it before the end of the week.
We don't need anything else signed with today's date or anything, just to come back today. I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know if we do or not, I'm just asking.
Thanks, Joe.
Can't hurt.
All right, guys. Okay.
You wanted?
Well, only because Rennie wasn't even on the
You could just
last,
say
the last
send
committee
back
report, he wasn't, he
information.
didn't even sign it.
As per attached, you can just.
I could do it, I don't mind.
Yeah, I think that would be cleaner, I would think. Because he wasn't even on this last one, on the last vote.
But you can go on to other stuff.
No, it's okay. We don't want to keep happy up. So we do have to make another change to, so I will invite you back.
Thank you for your time.
Welcome
Thank you for
back.
having me.
It's been so long.
You look like
I
the
miss
last,
you
you
guys.
look like the last
Oh
woman.
my gosh. All right, let's see where we are here. At the last meeting, I brought forward to you and you moved forward with a resolution to authorize the mayor to sign a municipal agreement to activate the local law to establish a sustainable energy loan program in the city of Kingston, which is called Open CPACE.
Yes.
It turns out that the very specific language that we needed to use was miscommunicated in terms of the local law. And it was implied in the previous local law that we would be amending the existing local law, which is not the case. We are adopting a new local law. The previous existing local law will not be superseded, will not be redacted. It will still exist, and this new local law will be in addition to said other local law. Thus, the local law, how many times can I say local law? The local law that you all need to vote on needs to literally say, instead of amending a local law to establish a sustainable energy loan program, it needs to say to establish a sustainable energy loan program.
So we're changing one word.
You are effectively, you are changing that word. There were some whereases that were superfluous that were added that have been additionally extracted. I have 3 copies of the new one if you want to see them. This is the language exactly per the Energy Improvement Corporation, the EIC, as directly as we need to adopt it. And so the resolution state remains. It will need to be voted again. Well, no, it doesn't need to be voted again.
Well,
It doesn't-
Be a first
yeah,
reading.
It doesn't need to be voted
No.
again, we just have
Just
to
do a first.
redo the first reading.
You just have to redo the first reading.
Yeah, so,
Right,
sorry,
yeah.
do two things at once.
So you don't have to redo the committee report. You don't have to redo anything except for you're changing the actual wording in the local law to say establishing a sustainable energy loan program instead of saying amending a local law to establish a sustainable energy loan program.
Bernie, do you have a?
Yeah, I have a question. This is a proposed new local law.
Correct.
Why would you not rescind the one that exists to avoid any confusion?
I agree that should be the case. Per the Energy Improvement Corporation, who is the body that is mandating that we advance this different local law in order to be able to enable our community to have access to this sustainable loan program. I spoke with them on the phone today, and she made it clear that our Corp Council needed to understand that this is not rescinding the previous law, because there are still active loans that pertain to our original, I'm sorry, not original, previous local law. So we have projects that are in motion that are in the program of the previous local law. This is now their new product or program in which we need to have both active in order for this to be able to advance.
Okay, so-
Moving forward, once those existing projects are done, it will be irrelevant, but it'll still be on the books. Yes,
Okay.
it's confusing, and yes, I don't think it's
Well,
fantastic.
then why would you not amend the existing law with what you're proposing?
Which is exactly what I think we should be doing, but again, I've been directed explicitly, believe me, I wouldn't be sitting here going through the change the word amend if we didn't need to be doing this.
Where's
This
Dan?
is, I did talk with Dan today
You want me to
about.
get him back in here?
Sure.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the existing projects need to abide by the existing law.
Correct.
And we're adopting a new law to apply to any new projects.
Correct,
Okay.
And that agency wants us to make it nice and clean.
correct. And it has to be consistent across all municipalities. So every municipality that adopts this local law adopts the exact local law with just the name of the municipality changed within the
Might not
local
be
law.
the best one to go with the measure.
No.
Okay, that's,
It's pretty clear.
yeah, makes sense to me.
Yeah, we gotta figure it out.
Oh,
So do we need to vote this out of
so we
committee
don't
then,
have to
or
vote, we're just.
it'll just be
gonna
another
go
reading?
through it.
Just aware that the verbiage in the local law changed from what you were voting on and under the impression that you were voting on.
Oh. So we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
I ran it for caucus, so everyone's clear on that, maybe.
So
Sure,
that,
sure.
so
Otherwise there'll
that
be some
it's,
confusion if they think it's a first reading again.
what was that?
No, I just said to make note of that so we can bring it up at caucus for the who aren't here, so that they're not confused why we're doing a first reading again.
Will you remember that or you want me to? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, forget it then.
Oh, you're waving goodbye. Okay, sorry.
My neighbor.
Okay, so the under old business, just to wrap that up, I talked to John Toohey, we're going to do the tow truck change, a request of change differently. So that's resolution number 187 that we referred back to this committee. We will not be moving forward.
Okay,
So that's all.
makes sense?
Yep,
So I did none of this work for nothing?
yep.
I wasn't
What
there
work
then.
did you do?
I wasn't there that day.
Okay. And then under new business, we already talked about, well, Ms. O'Leary represented the Hudson Valley Housing Development, so, and hopefully you read that email that she sent out, but that will, we could dig more into that when we're in the seeker process for the project, or for the open space plan. And then the last thing on the list also doesn't require a vote, but Ed Norman is here. He approached me a couple months ago about writing a letter from the council or members of the council to advocate for the city to get better services from Central Hudson and their contractors. If you ride around the city, drive around the city at all, you notice how our streets aren't in great shape. But a lot of it has to do with Central Hudson's work, that they're big, with 7-year.
Yeah, they're looking at 5 to 7 years still to come in the city of Kingston for their gas line replacements.
And how
I
long
had
are,
come to council, several of you over the last couple months to ask if we could put a letter together to the Public Service Commission to ask their help, because they're the driving force that are making Central Hudson replace these lines. So with Central Hudson, my communications with them over the past 6 months, we've had issues with their ability to restore the streets properly. Many meetings on site, off site, to get this done. I don't think they're at where they should be at with how their performance is. And again, I'm requesting a letter to the Public Service Commission to help reel them in possibly, to contribute more monetarily possibly, and just better practices.
Are they damaging the how far down do they go? And are they damaging any of the sewer system, anything like that?
Sometimes they get into the sewer laterals for homes, sometimes they get into the shallow sewer lines.
And who's making sure that those connections are being, and those things are being?
When they bring it to our attention, we do.
But they could be digging through and.
They've gone through and made spot repairs that we are unaware of until they fail, and then we go out and dig them up and finally happen, hit, and
Has that happened?
Oh, yes,
That happened in Ward 1 about a year and a half ago. There was a water main break. In the middle of the winter, it took 2 days to fix.
Quarry Street?
No, on Lucas Avenue, because when the water department went to dig it out, they realized that the gas line had been put right above the water main. So they couldn't fix their water main without Central Hudson coming, and it was on a weekend, so they had to wait until Monday for Hudson to come.
So it's getting back to, there's a lot of issues in our streets, creating work for DPW and financial burden on the taxpayer to have to then rehab these streets that wouldn't normally have to have been rehabbed for another 5 or 10 years. And the way the city uses its the funding for the blacktop, once we pave the street, we're not allowed to utilize that money again for that same street for 10 years. So my paving plan is basically being directed by Central Hudson.
and how long are we into this project?
Well, several years into it, but it was a 10-year plan altogether.
The Central Hudson plan,
Yeah.
not the paving plan.
How long has it been? When did they start?
Probably 3 years ago. So,
And we got 7 more years.
This letter is very good, by the way.
I like the letter.
So what I'm asking, I wrote this letter with Ed and with Ryan Kuhn, the deputy superintendent, making sure I have all the facts correct. They approved of it, and so what I'm hoping is to gather signatures from the council so that we could then send this in to advocate for the city's behalf, or on the city's behalf.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll get this on a council letterhead and maybe talk about it in caucus so that we can get everybody on board, and then whoever wants to sign it to bring this forward
Thank you.
and sign it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on that or anything? All right,
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adjourned. Meeting is adjourned.
Motion to adjourn. I know you're working full time, you're not long over.
At least I have